Go down the line.
So first off, thank you so much to everyone who came tonight. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kyle Rickle. I am a third-year education student here at the University of Maine. And what I am trying, in my opinion, student government has a transparency problem. It's gotten better in the past year, but it's still quite not where we want it to be. The last year, the participation rate of the election was approximately 7%, and this year, with this campaign, I've been trying to change that. And I just think that student government should be significantly more involved with student bodies' affairs. And some initiatives I'm currently working on to try to fix that include uploading our Senate meetings to YouTube, having financial reports that students know where their financial money is going involved with student government. And I'm also working on some other initiatives such as a 24/7 study space, and continuing to work on current exec initiatives such as the service bank and the club storage thing. So, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Memphis Peterson, and I'm currently here before you running for Vice President of Student Government alongside my dear friend Keegan Tripp. I've been here for the past 3 years studying political science, history, and legal studies. I'm also an RA on campus, and I've done a bunch of odd jobs, and those 3 years have really given me a perspective of how beautiful this campus and the student body is, and it's really given me a lot of, like I said, different perspective and all the different nuances, and it's really shown me what the student body not just wants, but what it really needs right now. And I believe that as Vice President of Student Government, I can really help all of the students who want to push forward their initiatives and their passions. I want to serve as kind of the spearhead that gets all of the bureaucratic paperwork out of the way to really let students take on what they think this campus needs. That's really what Keaton and I hope to do. We hope to improve connectivity, safety and services, and accountability. That's kind of our self-promoting trifecta for our campaign, and that's what we hope to achieve in the next year. And I really hope that I can earn all of your guys' trust and support tonight. So thank you for coming.
Hello. All right. Alrighty, guys. My name is Keegan Tripp. I'm a sophomore political science student here at the University of Maine. I currently serve as the student body vice president, and I am now running for president because I'm just simply not done working and kind of working alongside a lot of the faces in this room to improve the student experience here on campus. I came here as a freshman just last year and immediately fell in love with student government. It's kind of given me a second home here on campus. Getting involved can be really hard and scary, and the people that I met in this organization and along the way have really shaped me as a person, and I'm so happy to be here. Like Memphis said, we're running on a campaign platform of connectivity, safety and service, and accountability. These are things that I'm currently working on right now through a few of the projects that Kyle mentioned. I'm spearheading right now, as well as I'm not done. There's plenty we want to get done, and I'm excited to kind of explore those themes and whatnot and talk about why I'm running and why you should vote for us here tonight. So thank you for coming. Yeah.
I'll start with the first question. Which student concerns do you feel should be of highest priority to the executive team? And why?
Going into that first and then you can
In my opinion, when it comes to university and what students' concerns are, I think academics is definitely the absolute biggest concern that concerns students, because when they attend college, they're here for their degree, they're here to attend classes, and they're here to hopefully graduate. And I just think that student government can do a bit to help students along the way, such as a 24/7 study space, advocating on behalf of students in regards to different things, such as the add drop week, the add drop period. At other schools, that tends to be longer than it is here at the University of Maine. And I think that we can use advocacy for good, such as trying to convince administrators potentially like stretch that out and have it be like the same kind of length as it is other colleges. And I just think like academics is just what students are here for. Is the biggest concern of students in regards to what we can do to help them, and advocating on behalf of them to administration about what concerns them.
So overall, I'm fully aware that that is a very complex question. There are literally thousands of students on this campus with so many different backgrounds, so many different clubs and orgs, so many different majors and minors. I think that the most helpful that student government can be right now is rebuilding itself as more of a connective tissue between all of those students and really understanding, not just listening, but understanding what all of their concerns and problems are. And yeah, whether it be the frats, students, the honors college, all of those different governing bodies, what student government needs to do is really branch them together to where they're not just coming to student government, they need to be also going to each other. And student government needs to be the one reaching out to all of those different people on campus. That way, when we go to the administration with all of our questions, comments, and concerns, we look like more of a unified front, more like a student body that really wants to see this campus flourish and not just kind of meander on by every year.
All right. Memphis, what did this year's executive team do well, and what would you do differently?
So, my 3 years in student government, I have no hesitation in saying that this was by far the best executive board so far. Everybody perfectly understood their roles. Everybody was very helpful to each other. There was a surprising lack of drama the last couple of years where everybody was so intertwined and so melodramatic, it basically grinded everything to a halt. And this past year was very, very refreshing. The only problem is that literally all of them are leaving except for Keegan, who's a sophomore. So, yeah, that was easily the best part, was how professional, friendly, and honestly just communicative everybody was. Was there a second part to the question?
Yeah.
Is there anything you would do differently?
Anything I would do differently? So, part of me running for vice president boils down to understanding the more boring, bureaucratic, managerial side of student government. And I think the big thing that they could have improved on was really connecting the executives between the senators, because people who don't really understand how student government works, it's like the federal government. There's a bunch of different branches. Everybody has their own things that they can disclose and can't disclose. But I think that barrier between the different branches it's been pretty thick for the past couple of years. And I think that people, not just in student government, but outside of student government, could really use a better understanding of how they can communicate, how they can work together, how they can branch out to the students and the administration. And I think that's something that Keegan and I, with our experience and with our own skills and talents, can really do that.
Yeah, I think the best thing the execs have done this year is definitely kind of, the best thing the execs have definitely done this year is just the work ethic involving to their positions. Every exec had a different kind of initiative that they were working on, which I found unique in my 3 years of being in student government, is that I could go and go to the student leadership committee and then talk about something completely different than what the vice president of student organizations is doing. There's two completely different kind of initiatives they're working on, and both making substantial progress on that, which I think is amazing, especially considering it's just, in all, it was a really efficient year for vice presidents and the exec board as a whole. What I think I would do differently going into vice president role, vice president of student government, is it's kind of the same kind of path as what Memphis kind of outlined, which is being a lot more open to senators. For instance, if I get elected and able to pursue the 24/7 study space I wish to kind of implement on campus, if a senator came up to me and was like, hey, I love this idea, I want to help, I would bring them to those preliminary meetings. Even if there isn't anything tangible for them to kind of work on, I would still bring them to the meeting and have them at least understand what is happening. Because I think a big issue this year is that Keegan is going to be the only exec after this rollover this year. And I think a lot of kind of information is going to be lost to an extent as the execs graduate and move on with their lives. And I just think it's important to have consistency and being able to have the senators in the loop of the conversation and to be involved so that when the execs eventually, unfortunately, depart, the senators can easily step in and take over the ball and understand what is happening, what needs to be done.
You want to review that?
Have they answered this next question first? Do you have any concerns about the UMaine system and its decision-making process? And if so, could you elaborate on those concerns?
I think in general, most student voices are valued, are needed in the administration. I was personally on the Maine Day Task Force Committee, it was amazing to hear from administration about what their concerns are about issues, but at the same time I feel like the students who are in those sort of committees should have a tangible impact and understand what they can physically do to help out administration with whatever it is they need to kind of do, and not just be there just to be there, just to say, okay, a student's there, but actually having a tangible impact in just trying to connect it and understand administration concerns, but at the same time advocating for students to be in the room with and having their voices not only just heard, but acted upon of what the issues are, and understanding what it is students can kind of do to help out administration, help out each other, or just in general. Having a more cohesive university community, because at times it can feel kind of isolated from a student perspective, that you don't really know who's making decisions on the administrative level, you don't really understand. And I'm just trying to hopefully be a vice president who can go to these meetings and understand what their point of view is, understand what the student point of view is, and just connect them and have them understand what is happening and why, just advocating for students to administration.
So, do I have a problem with the UMS's decision making? Absolutely. These past 3 years, one of the positions I served was as the services chair, which made me a pretty big liaison between student body and auxiliary services. There were so many promises that were made by auxiliary services that were supposed to have been paid off by now that they haven't even started yet. So I think that a really big problem that the UMS system has is their decision making is very, very isolated or just borderline ignorant of the student body and what they want. There's all of the big projects that they announce, sure, they sound great. There are so many other things that they could be focusing on that all of the super big projects would basically just build themselves if the foundation of the campus was better. Whether it be quality of life in the dorms, even the roads or walkways, making sure that they're iced on time so nobody gets hurt. It's stuff like that that I really wish that they would prioritize, and that's what Keegan and I really want to help do. Because all these big projects are great, but like I said, students aren't finding out about them until ground's already been broken, and they're getting done in literally a fraction of the time that the stuff that students actually want, like Well Central being open, or better roadways, better dorms, before those have even been started, when they've been promised years ago, we've already got a hotel that's going up. And so that's something that Keegan and I really want to double down on next year is, like I said, it's not so much about communication or transparency, it's about accountability. And we really need to make sure that all of the super big brass decision makers are being held accountable by the thousands of students that make up this campus.
Kyle, how does your approach differ, and why does it give you an advantage?
I think that the student relationship with administration can at times be like a bit fragile, in that if we make a wrong sort of like move, we come at them from like a wrong sort of angle, the administration can just cut contact. They don't have to speak to students, technically speaking. And I think that creates a kind of concerning environment where the administration, like we want to hold the administration accountable, we also have to understand where they're coming from to an extent, so that we can like uphold the connection that's already being laid this year, for instance. Like if we go in like on swinging in September and they cut contact, it might like mess with student government for the entire year next year if we're not careful about it. So I think there's a delicate balance between holding them accountable and actually having that transparency, understanding where they're coming from at the same time. So not just ignoring them, but acknowledging their concerns, but at the same time countering their concerns with the accountability, with the kind of understanding of what students actually want. But it doesn't, and just like kind of having that bridge where like we hear from them first, and then we can respond back once we understand what they're saying and go through with connecting with them and just having our arguments that we make to the administration be really cohesive and understanding all the nuances of every situation.
Would you like to repeat that?
As in refute what he said,
Yeah.
or just answer the question?
Just sort of like, how does your vision differ from what you just said? And would you like back up the statements you originally?
So I think the different approach that I'd like to take is, like I said, it all circles back around to accountability, and that's not just against the admin or the board of trustees or the faculty on campus. That is accountability for student government. I think the most frustrating part of being a senator the past couple years is all of the super big, super smart student leaders who have more than enough resources to be able to make all of these change simply just haven't, unfortunately. They talk big game about the board needs to be more transparent or students need to be more communicative. Those are things that student government should be doing. Student government has all of the resources. We have more senators than ever now. We should be the ones going out and holding people accountable because that's what holds us accountable. And so I think that's the difference is, as vice president, I wouldn't be afraid to honestly really scrutinize student government and really make sure that everybody was on track, not just for themselves or their friends in the office, but making sure that they're actually serving their constituency, whether it be on behalf of the academic buildings, which are the seats that senators are elected into, the representatives for all the different boards on campus, or all of the students who are just trying to get by.
Okay. Memphis, this question is for you. Do you feel that you have the advantage in this election due to Tripp's endorsement?
I think that just being associated with Keegan Tripp at all is a major honor and a major endorsement. Like I said, I think the reason why Senate has flourished so much this year is because he was vice president. Last year, he came into the Senate as a freshman with literally no contacts, no resources, and built from the ground up probably one of the most visible and vocal, what's the word, influence on campus. And when he came to me asking me to run as his vice president, it was an absolute yes, I'd love to, because I know that being able to work with him, there are so many things that student government would be capable of, and the thousands of students on this campus, I think, have greatly benefited from him, and the fact that both of us are hopefully just getting started, and to be able to spend my senior year working alongside him would be a great honor. And so, yeah, I do think it's been a great advantage.
And Kyle, do you feel that you are at a disadvantage since Peterson and Tripp are roommates?
I think considering last year there was a 7% kind of participation rate among students in the student government election, and considering how many students are on this campus to begin with, what this election basically is should be trying to get as many students as we possibly can involved in student government in some capacity. Because most students, they don't understand what student government is. And I think that's really tragic, considering pretty much every student on campus pays approximately $63 activity fee. And I just think that students who pay and do that kind of thing should really recognize and know where their money is going, understanding who represents them to the administration, and just acknowledging that kind of transparency. Who are the people who represent me? Who's talking on my behalf? Who can alleviate from my concerns about campus? And it's just, I think a lot of this campaign is just trying to be, because I learned from talking to a bunch of other people at other student governments, their student governments tend to be significantly more involved in the everyday life of students. And I just think that I'm trying to get UMaine to kind of be the same way, where student government is actively involved in pretty much every area of campus, and trying to get students to understand what student government is, what we do, and why they should care about what we do.
Memphis, would you like to repeat that or any statements?
I think that's kind of one of the, misunderstandings or miscommunications that Keegan and I really hope to dispel with. And being able to campaign alongside him, sure, nobody's running against him, but I think that's only made it so we could put even more time and energy for this not just to be a Keegan Memphis campaign, but a Student Government Inc. campaign, and really setting the tone of student government's no longer just rebuilding post-COVID. We want to enter an innovation phase, which is why we've gone around to as many clubs and orgs and student populations as we can, not just telling them, please, please, please vote for us, but really asking them the questions of, if we become president and vice president, what do you expect from us? So I think that this campaign has really been a sign of our commitment to the undergrad student body, and really helping them understand that we're here for you, even if we're super different and if we have super different parameters or limitations, that shouldn't hold us back in the next year.
You want to speak on that again?
Yeah, I just want to see a quick show of hands in the audience. Who here is involved in Greek life in any capacity? Okay, and who here is involved in club athletics in any capacity? I just think that there's a fundamental kind of disconnect between student government and other student leaders on campus. And I'm just trying to resolve that through communication and transparency of student government actually going to these IFC panel meetings and talking to the student leaders there about what we're doing, why you should care, and to offer the invitation to kind of get involved. We should be collaborating with these other groups on campus. We should be connecting with them and having them actually understand what we are doing. And I just think that we can't do that unless we go out of our way and have every student understand what student government is in the first place.
Would you like to speak on that?
I'd be happy to claim that Keegan and I have already started doing that. Like I said, this is a campaign for Student Government Inc., not just Keegan and Memphis. And yeah, that circles back around to connectivity, safety and service, accountability. That's not a student government issue, that's a student body and student leader issue. And that's something, like I said, we've already started on, we've already been doing for years, and we only hope to continue.
I've also been campaigning at Greek Life, athletics, and talking to them. But I think what's important is not just campaigning at them, but following up with them and actually seeing how we can, what kind of projects we can collaborate with IFC, PNM, or AVIL Athletics, and collaborating with them and having them, and just knowing what their concerns are, and just being able to have visible faces to what student government is. And that's the kind of campaign I'm trying to run, where student government is intertwined with what these other groups are doing.
Would you say that your opponent is qualified to serve as the vice president next year? Why or why not?
Memphis is absolutely qualified to serve as VP. I think arguing anything else is just disingenuous to his character and his previous positions in student government. Yeah, I just think he is qualified.
In regards to Kyle, thank you very much. That means a lot to me. Kyle and I are both the two longest serving senators. I know for a fact that both of us have been here since basically our first days here on campus. And so I would have no doubt that if he's been able to stick it out this long, Kyle, he absolutely has the resolve and dedication to be the vice president. He's already a very visible student leader, as he's proven with his campaign, and I have no doubt that he would make a great face for the student senate and student leaders around campus.
All right. The next question is going to go back to you, Memphis. Given those qualifications, what makes you a better choice for VP than the opposing candidate?
So overall, these past 3 years, the positions that I've served as the chairman of a few different committees, namely the Services and the Policy and Procedure Committee. I've served as the President Pro Tempore for a full year, as the Sergeant at Arms for another full year, and also, what was the other thing again? As the Security Representative for the student body. And all of those are very different facets of what a student senator can be. They all have their own powers, their own responsibilities, and I think these past 3 years of really bouncing around the Senate and seeing all of the different nuances around campus, I think that becoming vice president, I view this more as me stepping back into obviously a more moderating managerial role, but that's because I understand what other senators can be capable of in these positions, the positions that they can create, the initiatives they can start, the bills that they can vote on, and really making sure that that student senate is as efficient and genuine as possible.
I have served in various committees on student government over my time here, such as Student Organization Committee, Electoral Budget Committee, Student Leadership, among others, other kind of student government committees. But I think what makes me a different candidate is that I've been on the other side of the Electoral Budget Committee. I've been a treasurer of a sports club, going in and asking student government for funding. I am incredibly involved on campus in a variety of things, tradition societies, athletics, academic clubs, and I just think that kind of perspective is essential in student government, because it's one thing to be on one side of it, overseeing it, but it's another thing to actually be the person who student government is communicating with involving issues. And I just, no disrespect to Memphis, but I just disagree that the vice presidency should be a managerial kind of role. I think it should be someone who's outspoken and incredibly involved, communicating with these clubs, going to the meetings and talking about what student government is, and just connecting and reaching out to students where they already are, and just being able to have that transparency. Because as I said before, most people on this campus do not know what we do, and I just really would like to change that.
Memphis, do you agree that most people do not know what student government does? And would you like to review any other points?
Yeah, first, I believe it's called the Executive Budget Committee. And secondly, I think the idea that vice president should be a more outspoken role, that's definitely an interesting idea, and I don't disagree with that. However, I already have my outspoken head of state, who is a very charismatic, very intelligent, very friendly and approachable person who will always go above and beyond to talk to as many people as need be to be able to get the job done. That's where I come in, of handling all of the boring managerial stuff that people call me crazy for being so passionate about. That's something that I've already done for the past 3 years. It's something that I think I've done with overall results. Like the services committee may not have been a home run. There were so many empty promises that I was given that I then gave to the student body. And then after that, taking a more internal role with policy and procedure, it's only made everything so much more effective. We've got more senators than ever. Executives are being held accountable. They're more aware of their job performance and what the student body expects from them. And so that's what our vision of student government is. It's worked for the past year, and I only hope to keep that going. And in regards to the student body not understanding student government, absolutely. But like I said, that's why Keegan and I are both here, is we really want to help people understand. Just because our student government is different doesn't make it weaker. If anything, it only makes it stronger. We're completely detached, well, at least executive power-wise, we're detached from things like CSI. We can fund literally tens of thousands of dollars to a student body. So sure, there's things that we can't do, but there's plenty more things that we can do, and I think student government's really just scratching the surface so far.
This question is for how can students hold you and other UMaine student government leaders accountable for less favorable decisions made in office?
I think the most basic way of having students hold me accountable as my position, as my would-be position, is to simply know who I am to begin with. If students really recognize student government to begin with and realize who the student leaders are representing them, then naturally, if there's an issue that arises, they know who's involved with it and who to go to if they hold someone accountable.
Overall, I think that's a great point. I think that's another part of why our exec board has been so great this year is, I think just because there's a long way to go doesn't mean that we haven't made a whole lot of progress with visibility. Like our website, I'm pretty sure just last year was so out of date, it was so bland, but now our new director of technology, in like a matter of minutes, made it exponentially better. And stuff like that is definitely important for keeping student government accountable, as Kyle said. But I also think a great way for student government to be held accountable is by sometimes making those difficult decisions that students might not agree with, but we still need to be able to let them speak their mind. And whether that be through senators or representatives, or even something Keegan and I plan on implementing, a mostly open door policy where we're not just talking to club and org leaders, we're also talking to students who simply just want to speak their mind and have their voices heard. I think that's a great way for student government to be held accountable. And then not just that, but even if, like I said, if they think we're doing something wrong, Keegan and I will want to hear that. We'll be disappointed if nobody comes to us complaining. I'm pretty sure that means that we're doing something wrong. So the more discourse that there is, the more discussion and debate that there is, means that there's so much more potential that the student body can have.
All right, for Memphis, what can make the Senate become a more inclusive environment?
I think that it goes back to the outreach of student government. It's obviously no surprise. I'm a poli-sci major, he's a poli-sci major. Pretty sure the only college of Senate seats that's completely filled up is liberal arts and sciences, and probably all of those are poli-sci majors. So when it comes to being more inclusive, it really means reaching out to the colleges like education, the engineering college, because when people think inclusivity, they think things like race, gender, all of that's super important, but that's the stuff that we need to be reaching all of the student body before we can really focus on that. Like I said, we need to build like the foundations of communication, and then all of the hidden gems of student leaders with truly unique perspectives and ideas will, hopefully they'll be enticed to come forward and really step into the roles that they deserve. But the first step is really just reaching out to more than just poli-sci students.
This kind of issue is the exact reason I'm running my campaign in the first place, because most people don't know what student government is, and I think that in order to get more senators of differing like majors and colleges and etc., the first thing we have to do is have people realize that student government is even an option in the first place. Yeah, and just like a little history thing, in case most people didn't know this, but it used to be that student government was mostly like Greek life. Like a lot of the people who were student leaders on student government also tend to be student leaders in other areas of campus. And it is still like that, do not get me wrong. But I also think that we're missing out on a lot of student leaders that could have been really amazing in student government if we only reached them while they were freshmen or sophomore and had them recognize that student government was a viable option they could hone their skills in.
Yeah, I'm mostly right.
For Kyle, what would your potential partnership with potential future President Tripp look like?
Yeah, I think I would work incredibly well with President Tripp. Really, I think I'd work pretty well with anyone who reaches out, but especially someone such as Vice President Tripp, I think I'd work very well with if elected to this position. And I think we have I think everyone on the stage has very similar, in a way, similar ideas in that we all want the best for student government. And I think as long as we keep that kind of scope in mind, that what we're doing is for the betterment of our group, I think we can work incredibly well together.
You can speak on that too. What would your potential future working relationship with potential future?
Well, working with him as a senator and a vice president, I think has been nothing but phenomenal. I think there's, between us, so much synergy, so much passion, and the important thing is that we both agree on a vision of what student government should be, but we're not afraid to disagree with each other on how to get there. And I think that's really important for our vision of a head of state and head of government, is really, if we're not technically arguing with each other, then we are missing so many potential flaws in our ideas, and we're missing so many potential upsides to our ideas too. So I think that's part of what makes us the perfect duo. Is we disagree, we argue, we debate, but in the end we're doing it for the same reason, and that's to make student government as communicative and accountable as possible.
My first question is also for you. How will you bridge the gap between the student body and administration?
So some of the big ideas that, well, first let's just talk about what Keegan's already done. As vice president, as a sophomore, he's the one who started something we call the guest speaker series, where once a week he brings in some of the biggest names within the UMaine system, whether it be the president, people from the board of trustees, the provost, Tad Stone from the Sodexo transfer, yeah. And each of those have been met with so much discussion and so much progress, honestly. But we view that as only the first step, because that's only us bringing the administration to the Senate. And obviously we want to kind of step maybe to the side a little bit so the administration is talking directly to the student body. How we can do that? We can definitely invite them to things like town halls and Q&A sessions, and really anything that we hear from the administration or faculty, like workshops or focus groups. We want to make it a priority for student government to make sure that all of the students hear about those, because those are opportunities of the administration in the once in a blue moon where they actually reach out. We want to make sure that everybody's hearing it as much as possible.
I've talked a bit, like earlier on, about how if, as vice president, I have a meeting with administration and a senator comes up to me and is like, hey, I want to work on that too. I've tried my best to have them also go to that meeting. I think the same is also true for different people on campus in general, maybe who aren't even affiliated with student government. For instance, if there's a issue involving sustainability on campus and I get the opportunity to talk to someone in the administration about it, I should be reaching out to relevant student leaders and people who might also be interested in such a specific initiative. That's not necessarily maybe a student government thing, but it might be an initiative they really care about and can accomplish in their group on their own. And just connecting the kind of bridge for where students and administrators who might not otherwise kind of communicate and talk to each other, just reaching out and just having that kind of line of dialogue, even if I'm just a mediator in that kind of conversation in that regard.
Why are you a better choice for vice president than the opposing candidate?
I think something that makes me specifically a unique choice is that I have been incredibly involved on campus. Anything from choir, dance, Model UN, athletics, like rowing. Like, I understand entirely student government. I also understand what it's like to be on the other side of student government as just a normal student, trying to get funding for my club or being able to just reach out to student government. I've been on both sides of it, and I think that's really important when we talk about transparency and connecting other students. I understand what it's like for some of those students. I understand just what it's like being a student involved in some of those other extracurriculars and what And I understand how to connect with them as a leader and as someone in student government, how to connect with them and how to reach out to them. And I just think that makes me a different candidate in regards to communication and transparency.
I was looking more for a direct comparison to your opponent. What makes you better than Memphis Peterson as a candidate for vice president?
I'm sorry, but I'm not trying to show what you're looking for in regards to my campaign.
Like, we understand that, like, you are unique, but what makes that a better candidate than Memphis?
Because when we talk about transparency and connecting with students on the campus, having someone who's a recognizable face in a variety of clubs, I think is really important for like reaching out and connecting with students where they're already at and involved in those clubs. Is that more?
Thank you.
Would you like to review?
Yeah, I think what makes me the best possible candidate for this is I think I have, I hate tooting my own horn, but I think I have probably the best understanding of what student government is. And that's kind of just come naturally the past 3 years being a senator and the different roles that I've taken on. I think what also makes myself a better candidate is the vision that Keegan and I both share for what student government should be achieving actually fits within what student government is. Like I absolutely hate doing this, but Kyle once had an idea regarding paying club and organization dues on campus, and before we could even discuss that, it was discovered that that was illegal, and student government as a nonprofit association couldn't even do that. What sets us apart is the fact that we're not just trying to put out small fires as they show up. We're trying to find what causes those fires and really iron them out for good. Student government shouldn't be paying member dues. It should be working to make sure those member dues are as cheap as they can be, whether it's through buying equipment, renting space, stuff like that. And I think the most important thing, especially as vice president, when you have somebody as charismatic and outspoken as Keegan, you need somebody who isn't afraid to play the bad guy, which this past year, I'm sure so many people, especially in student government, know this. I'm not afraid to say no, and I'm not afraid to tell you that you're wrong, because that's what keeps student government's unique and important status alive. Because it can come down to the one smallest mistake that any passionate, driven senator makes, and everything's ruined. Everything that so many people have worked for would get ruined, and you need somebody there in the managerial internal position who's not afraid to really challenge them and make sure that they understand what they're doing.
Just to talk about the specific financial kind of thing real quick, I discovered that with Sean, with the Vice President of Financial Affairs, despite having meetings with them beforehand, that's the entire point of us going to Sean, to realize if there was a possible initiative that we could do in the first place. That was a very preliminary kind of meeting to begin with, and that was the entire reason for us meeting with them, just to see if it was even possible. It's not, and that's fine. That's why we went to him in the first place, to find out if it was a possibility. We should be trying to find other ways, new ways, to reach out to students and connect with them, to new ways to help students. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a meeting with someone who goes, well, this initiative won't work like that. And that's the entire point of us trying in the first place. We shouldn't be scared to try and take on those sort of new initiatives.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being wrong. I say no to student government all the time, and I get voted down, I get scrutinized for it, and that's kind of what makes me stronger. That's what gives me a better understanding. But what I mean is when you start campaigning on these ideas, I'm pretty sure it says on your Instagram somewhere, paying club dues, that's the same kind of problem that Keegan and I want to stop people like the administration and faculty from making, or these unkeepable promises. And part of that has to come with really the scrutiny of when Keegan and I both wanted to run together, we really sat down and ironed out what can we do for the student government? What can we not do for student government? What shouldn't we do? And I think that's a really important part of our dynamic, is really thinking ahead while reflecting at the same time to make sure that everybody gets not just what they want, but what they deserve.
All right, so we've heard everyone speak for a while. We have a couple minutes for there to be open questions, and keep in mind that you can ask any of the lovely candidates on our stage a question. Jacob, you raised your hand first.
So my question's for the two vice president candidates, and whoever wants to can go first. So I run the orientation meetings for new senators, and we always talk about how the Senate is the one that's the most powerful body in UMSG. So I'm kind of curious about why you guys haven't done these initiatives that you guys are talking about and advocating for this year in your campaigns, why you haven't done those across these past 3 years. What's been stopping you?
So I think that is a great point, and that's something that Keegan and I have also really campaigned on, is all of these super big promises, super great ideas. Why haven't we already done them? Well, Keegan and our current president, Michael DeLorge, there's plenty of these things that they've already started on, and such as when it comes to safety and service, one of the biggest crises on campus right now is club storage and space. So many different clubs are basically clawing at each other, trying to get reservations in the union or different classrooms, lecture halls, even the memorial gym. And that's just for practice, which they have to pay for, by the way. And then all of these clubs and organizations are also fighting each other on where to store all of their equipment because they don't want to have to put them in totes in their own rooms. They're small enough, they don't need all of that equipment flooding over them. That's something that Keegan's been working diligently on. The Vice President of Student Organizations, Julian Ober, has been working diligently on. And it's just big projects like that where we're totally fine with the rest of this year being a part of a rebuilding and organizing phase, but when Keegan and I are in office, that will officially be over, and we want that to be the initiative phase, which is why we've been going around talking to clubs and organizations, asking them not just what do you want, what do you expect, what do you hope to achieve, and how do you want student government to be able to help?
When it comes to things such as transparency and connectivity and all of that sort of reaching out students to reaching student government out to the student body, it's gotten better in the past year, but that's not something that's a level you hit and then maintain forever. That's something that we can constantly kind of work on and make strides towards helping and working on. And as a senator, I've been doing my absolute best to be involved where I can and having people know what student government is in the first place. And part of the reason I'm running for an exec position this year is to be able to be inside those conversations of what sort of bigger kind of initiatives, such as, for example, Service Bank, where I've been inside the student leadership committee already. And how do I follow through with that? And the answer to me is running for the exec position and being at the forefront and making sure that gets accomplished in the next year. And so to me, at least, it's a matter of consistency and making sure that these initiatives that we've begun working on in student government actually get followed through and finished.
Does anyone else have a question? Oh, hey, John. Paige, do you need a microphone? I didn't think so.
I think I have a question for all three candidates, finally. But what is a policy flaw that you see within UMSG, and how are you planning on fixing that? Whether it be hiring policies, financial policies, constitution, student org policies, just a general policy flaw that you see within the organization.
Hello? All right. Okay, so glad I can finally speak. Hi guys, how we doing? So one of the policy flaws I think that I see in our organization isn't necessarily substance, but it's inconsistency. When I became Polypro chair, one of my biggest goals, and kind of all I worked on in that first year, was to update policy and how we actually do it. There's kind of a little bit of a disconnect between kind of the practices of student government and what our policies say, because some of them are genuinely poorly written, some of them are out of date, some of them are grammatically bad. So that's kind of one of the big things that I'd like to do too this coming year, is really iron it out, because I'm a firm believer in we're here now and we're here in this moment, and we have control over kind of what's going on here and now, and in a few years we won't be. So something that I really want to work on in my next year, possible 2 years, depending on where I go, no promises. But I would like to make sure that I'm leaving all of our policies and guidelines and stuff more efficient, better, up to date and whatnot, so that when other people do take on those roles, they're not plagued with the same inconsistencies that we deal with, the same confusion, the same, sometimes we have to sit there and kind of, what does this mean? And does this make sense? And well, that's not how we do it. And that kind of slows down student government, and the goal is for it to be as efficient as possible. It's already a little slow, you know what I mean? Bureaucracy and whatnot. But we need to make sure that we are running at full capacity, and that starts by making sure our guidelines and policies are up to date and fixed.
Yeah, I pretty much second all of that.
Yeah, something policy-wise, like to me specifically, is that I do think it's a bit of, this is nothing against like anyone in Singapore, don't get me wrong, but I do think it's a bit of a shame there's only 3 candidates flying this year, because I remember last year there was approximately 5 or 6 candidates last year, and I think that's the bigger the elections are, the more kind of widespread student government's name gets out to more people, and I just think it's kind of a shame that there isn't more candidates up here, and I think that in terms of what policy would actually change that, it's just having a larger window for people who maybe aren't privy to student government conversations to collect signatures and be able to run in the first place, even if they aren't necessarily involved in student government. So in terms of policy, I try to make the election a lot more kind of accessible to students who maybe who wouldn't otherwise kind of know about it in the first place. And that's like nothing against like any sort of, I think the election's won wonderfully this year. I just think in the future, kind of like having more students up on stage debating would be pretty cool.
Ian, would you like to repeat that? I would.
So this year,
I muted.
that's okay. Okay. So this year, one of my main points, working with actually FEPC Chair Olson, starting last year when I was Polypro Chair, was revamping the FEPC guidelines. They were a mess. Another one of those documents that need a lot of fixing. And we started it I became a candidate at the time, and I didn't want to interfere with like election guidelines and whatnot, so I took a step back. But I made sure that that was one of our top priorities as Vice President moving forward, that those things would be changed far and before the election kind of started. One of our main changes is that no longer is it one day, it's a full week. And that is a huge, huge thing for kind of the inclusivity of this election, trying to get those votes out. I agree, I think full-heartedly we need more people involved. But a lot of those concerns and whatnot, we worked really, really hard on. And while I don't disagree with the idea of expanding things, I think there was a time to voice those concerns and those like kind of issues, and that was earlier this year. So I think that's kind of where I'm at, is while I agree that we need to get more people involved and we need to take action for that, but I guess my question is kind of more so, while we were working on it, why weren't those concerns voiced?
My understanding of Sandal was that we had a Tuesday night that was like it was announced that the nomination forms would be available the very next day, which is kind of like a sudden announcement to pretty much anyone, I think. Which is kind of why I just think like in the future we should have nomination forms that are available for a longer period of time to collect signatures. So we have more people running in these elections and having student government's name be more like out there. This is an option for students who might otherwise not realize that this is an available kind of position they can run for.
But with all due respect, you've been a senator for the past 3 years. Isn't that something that shouldn't really be news to you? And shouldn't that be kind of your responsibility to educate all the senators of, hey, this might be a little flawed, but here's an incoming opportunity for you to really step up as a leader and executive for student government?
The schedule was only public for like the night before the nomination forms were available. And then from when the nomination forms were available, there was 1 week to collect signatures. I just think in the future there should be a longer period of time for students to be able to get those signatures and realize that, be able to compose themselves and realize that this is something I can reasonably run for. And I just don't think a week is enough time, unless you're already involved in student government. I don't think a week is enough time for that.
Any more questions? Neil? And then Kate.
Okay. So, I know you guys mentioned that you've been going around or you outreach with Greek organizations. So you guys at chat today. Very good to see you. So what I'm wondering is obviously since Greek life is like a lot of the student body, right? It's like 10 to 15%. I don't know if there's one entity that represents as many undergraduate students as Greek life does. I'm wondering what you think the biggest challenges facing Greek organizations are and how you're going to work with Greek leaders to solve them.
I was going to let our head of state take that.
One thing, you want to
Yeah, this may not be a universally kind of true sentiment, but something I kind of gathered while speaking to a lot of like fraternity and sorority leaders was that recruitment this past winter was kind of not what they kind of thought it was going to be. And I just think that a lot of students who go on the University of Maine don't really recognize Greek life as a viable opportunity for them to enter and get involved with. And I think student government can do something such as like collaborating with IFC and PNM and just having some sort of like seminar thing where it's like, Greek life is an option if you didn't like realize. And just having that kind of availability there that people would recognize, maybe a lot of students who wouldn't have gone to Greek life otherwise can see like kind of this like thing before Watch Week that like Greek life is an available kind of option that any student get involved with and get into. And I just think I kind of hope that recruitment like that is definitely something that city government can advertise and associate with and just have out fraternities and sororities.
Okay, so I think part of what this campaign, as I think was kind of mentioned several times by my running mate, but as well as Kyle, is it absolutely needs to be a campaign for UMSG because UMSG hasn't campaigned for itself in a really long time. And part of that is making sure that when we as student leaders are representing people, that we're representing them to the best of our ability. And the reality is that I'm not a Greek student on this campus, right? I'm not a multicultural student, right? I'm not in the athletes. I don't fully understand what those issues are. I can take a stab. I think that there's an issue of misrepresentation. I think there are things that are attributed to Greek life that are true. I think the good things of Greek life sometimes get overshadowed by rumors and kind of this like end all be all of these people are the same mentality, and that's just simply not true. Greek life on this campus makes up roughly 15%, but also the philanthropy that they do is one of like the largest that brings in charity on this campus, and they're important. They provide not just a place to hang out with friends or to meet new people, but they also provide an entire community of like-minded individuals who maybe be struggling on campus. It's a support system, it's a community, but at the end of the day, when it comes to Greek issues and issues of certain kind of factions on campus, I'm not going to understand. So what my role is as a representative and someone who wants to represent them correctly and right and good is by, like we said, bringing them into those conversations. I think that that's our goal in visiting your chapter. It was lovely, it was awesome. But like we said, we asked kind of the questions. What are the issues that you're facing, right? Why do you feel that student government is hostile to like Greek life? Or where do you think that we could improve in our representation? Or where do you think the administration can improve in your support? Like we need to be asking those questions because we don't understand them. It's just a fact. We wouldn't unless we're part of it, and I'm not going to try to sit here and pretend like I do. I want to bring those into the fold. I want to have those conversations because they're not just important, they're necessary. If student government at all wants to be representational, and I think we do, at least I want it to be, and I guess that's kind of my answer, is that if I don't understand something, if I don't know something, I will ask.
Okay, your question is the last. You guys each have a minute to respond.
All right. So I'll keep it short. Keegan, you could have chosen pretty much anyone to be your running mate. Why did you choose Memphis Peterson?
So I kind of thrusted myself into a position real quick, real soon, and I wasn't sure how I got here, but I'm endlessly grateful for the opportunity. And as much as I loved, hearing like the good things about, I guess, myself, maybe that sounds conceited, but like hearing kind of why, or how Memphis felt when I chose him. At the end of the day, my goal is to address an issue that student government has had for a long time, which is a little bit of an echo chamber, right? Not necessarily is it just poli-sci students. I think that this exec team, again, is incredible and wonderful, and I think that this applies to this exec team least so from others. But in the past, there has been an issue of kind of, I believe, friends choosing friends, the same ideas coming around, like was pointed out, in the past, or I believe actually Kyle pointed this out earlier, is kind of like one initiative and everybody's working on it instead of kind of individual stuff. I believe in creating and cultivating a nature of discourse, right? I think that we need healthy discourse in student government. I think we need healthy discourse on this campus in general. And I hate the kind of sometimes this feeling of not being able to speak your mind or being afraid of disagreement, because that is like literally the last place or last thing that should be happening in our organization. So the reason I chose Memphis are twofold. One, we do not agree on everything. And I think that's important. I think getting those perspectives that are different are crucial, especially in, again, an organization like ours that has been somewhat of an echo chamber. Now, I understand that we're both poli-sci students, but we do see kind of the student government in a very different way. Like he said, he's been using kind of this head of state, head of government thing. I think that's super important. I think that something that has made myself and current President Delorge really effective is our ability to kind of turn back to back, quite literally, in our offices and hit the nose, get down on the ground and like really get things done without having to worry about the other. And I think that's what really kind of drew me to Memphis is that at least in student government, he is one of the most driven. He comes up with ideas of his own, right? He's pursuing them. I don't have to worry about that. I don't want to have to worry about the internal stuff. I'll be honest, I think that in terms of the student government vice president, it is very internal, it is very managerial, and I myself have stepped a little bit out of that box and made it a little bit more forward-facing. But I think in an ideal partnership, we can have those two very different roles acting at once to be much more efficient in that regard. So yeah, I think it comes down to resolve. I don't think I've ever seen Memphis say something that he didn't mean. I also don't think Memphis has ever promised, not necessarily promises from the administration who was to give to students, but anything that he promised that he had full control over, he followed through with. And that's what I respect, and that's what I really need, and I think the student government needs, is somebody who can really hit the nose, hit the ground. Okay, I'm mixing up all of them. Hit nose to the grindstone, is that it? All right. Put their nose to the grindstone that I don't have to worry about, but I know that when I'm pursuing projects like the syllabus bank that I've been working on, or the YouTube account and stuff that I've been working on, I don't want someone who's just gonna pick up, the same projects. I want somebody who, while I'm working on those projects, can come up with their own, so that we're not just, again, focusing on 1, 2, or 3 things. We can do that whole plethora of stuff. So, yeah, that's why I chose Memphis.
Thanks, Keegan. That concludes our debate. Can I get some applause for our guest?